Hi, I'm Victoria, and I'm going to be going over prompt number 2. So, a dominant allele is one that dominates the phenotype or the trait that you see expressed. So, if there is a dominant and recessive allele present, you will actually only see the dominant trait. This is just like a little bug being covered up by a blanket. The dominant allele sort of acts like a blanket and covers it up. So, you only see that dominant trait. The show that we're going to be going over is Gilmore Girls, and our trait of interest is coffee addiction. So, people who have this trait will consume an excessive amount of coffee every day, and who do not show this trait will have no addiction to coffee. So, first, we're going to go through and see if this is consistent with an X-linked dominant pattern of inheritance. So Emily Gilmore does not show this trait, so that would have to make her have two recessive alleles on both of her X chromosomes. Richard Gilmore also doesn't show this trait, so that means he would have to have one recessive allele on his X chromosome. However, this is not consistent with the form of inheritance because Lorelai does show this trait, so it cannot be X-linked dominant since this would cause her to inherit two recessive alleles. For X-linked recessive, since Emily Gilmore does not show this trait, that means she would need to have at least one dominant allele on one of her X chromosomes, and Richard Gilmore would also need to have a dominant allele on his X chromosome. However, this is also not consistent with an X-linked recessive form of inheritance because Lorelai would need to inherit two recessive A alleles on both of her X chromosomes, and this does not work with this form of inheritance. For an autosomal dominant trait, that means that Emily Gilmore would need to be recessive since she does not show this trait, and same for Richard. However, Lorelai does show this trait, and through this pattern of inheritance, she would also be recessive, so this is not consistent. For an autosomal recessive trait, that means that Emily Gilmore could be heterozygous for this trait since she does not show it, and Richard Gilmore could also be heterozygous for this trait, which would allow Lorelai to inherit two recessive alleles and show this trait. Christopher could also be heterozygous for this trait, which would allow Rory to be showing this trait and autosomal recessive, so this is consistent. For the Y-linked trait, this is not consistent because the two individuals that show this trait do not have a Y chromosome, so it could not be found on the Y chromosome and is not consistent.